Joining me today is Martin from 80 Degrees Magazine. I'm a huge fan of their publication, so I'm really excited to share some of their story with you all. Thank you so much for being here, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Nicole.
Yeah, so to get started, I guess, can you tell me a little bit about your tea journey? How did you become interested in tea?
I've always drunk tea. When I was growing up, tea was very much an infusion type of situation, a lot of herbal infusions. Tea as such, I didn't really know until I was about 15, when I think was the first time when I drank sencha, not knowing what it was. And I remember very specifically, I didn't like it at all because I think it's quite an acquired taste for someone who doesn't know it. But then when I was probably some 15 years ago, I started drinking, proper teas, would be also infusions or infused blends like Earl Grey. I used to live in London, so there was a lot of Earl Grey going around. I used to like jasmine tea a lot. So that was kind of the staples until about probably 8 years ago. I got to know some people from China and also from London who knew much more about tea than I did. And they introduced me to it, and I realized, okay, what is this? This is something completely different to what I knew. And I realized that there are so many more teas, so many teas that I was not even aware of. The tea culture is so rich. So slowly, I was discovering through retailers in London different types of tea, different varieties, a huge amount of new flavors. And yeah, 8 years later, I have a stash of 100 teas, and there's no way back. So,
There definitely isn't. Once you go down that rabbit hole, I don't think you could really ever go back to kind of the old way of doing tea once
yeah.
you get there. I really love the idea of having a physical magazine. So much of what we do now is digital and online based, lots of screens. And it's nice to just take a break and have something physical to read. So, what was your inspiration behind starting 80 Degrees?
Yes, I totally agree. We're very used to the screens now. We're constantly bombarded with notifications, and everyone is trying to get your attention. I guess the pivotal moment was when I was moving from London to Portugal, where I live now. I left my job in advertising, and it was a perfect opportunity to try something different. And at that time, coincidentally, I came across other independent print publications. There are a lot of, it was kind of in the beginning of the wave of indie print. There were magazines about all kinds of topics, different drinks, wine, coffee, travel, many different topics. But I didn't really find anything about tea, and tea was already something I was quite interested in. So I kind of saw this lack, this gap in the market, and I thought, now is the right time to try to do something different from my previous career. And printing a magazine is as different as it can get. It's a very challenging business or undertaking, if you will. So yeah, the idea was to try to do this. You can always print the first issue and see what happens. Following the second issue is very different, very difficult. So yeah, the first issue I put together when I moved to Portugal. I think it took me about not even 4 months from completely scratch, from getting the idea to deciding what goes in it, designing it, finding the people, and actually printing. It was a very fast process, which was very encouraging. And then once it came out, I realized, okay, there is so much more to running a magazine. There is not so much fun. So yeah, second issue took a little longer. I think it was 9 months or 10 months. It was quite a difficult time, but then it kind of became more streamlined, and yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, it definitely can be very challenging. I know I used to make like a quarterly journal that was just a digital magazine for my blog. And even that was just so much work that I eventually stopped doing it
Mm,
because it really was just a lot to, get people to write articles, follow deadlines, put everything together and have it like look nice as well. So I definitely, definitely admire you for being able to do that. And I've been really following the magazine from the beginning, and I just received your 12th issue in the mail, which is really
I can
great
see.
to see that you've been able to continue. How do you find articles for the magazine?
That's probably the most difficult part, deciding what to put in it. I've probably noticed that each issue has a semi-permanent structure. So there is an article about a specific type of tea. There is an interview with someone who is somehow related to tea, but it's not really in the tea industry. And then we have stories about farmers, and there are some travel stories and rituals and things like that. So there is a structure that I like to follow. And I have a list of topics I want to cover in the future. So that's easy to just choose from and find the right people to talk about it. But then there are also a lot of contributors who come to me and offer, a lot of journalists and writers, or even people who are not writers but who have a lot of experience with tea. So they come and offer their ideas. So it's a constantly evolving process. There is a lot going on at any given time. So yeah, it's just I always try to find a way to somehow bind all the topics together. I mean, there is no theme per issue as such, but it always ends up being somehow nicely related to each other. And I think it adds to the nice experience of having the magazine in your hands, like you asked before. What is the advantage of having something like this? It's just because tea, as you know yourself, it's a very slow process. You can't rush tea. And reading about it, I think it's a nice compliment of having such a magazine that you can actually hold something physical in your hand. There is no distractions, no notifications, and you can read, a longer article, a deeper story, deep dive into tea while having your cup. It's just a perfect mix.
Absolutely. And one of the things I really enjoy about the magazine is that it's not full of advertisements. So you do have sponsors, but I love that there's not, an ad every other page like you might see
Hmm.
with most other magazines. Was that like a conscious decision that you made?
It was, yes. So there are no ads as such. There are patrons, so people can become patrons, i.e., they get their magazines, but they pay a little bit more to support the magazine. But there are no ads as such. I wouldn't say that I'm against ads in the magazine, not at all. I think it's important. It's a business at the end of the day, so you have to cover all your bases, and it doesn't mean that in the future there won't be ads in the magazine, but it definitely can't be a publication where every other page is an ad, just like any generic periodical that you see in the newsstand. The idea of the magazine is to create something collectible, something that is nice. I mean, if you look at the materials, I hope people appreciate the type of paper that is used, the way it's printed, the way it's designed. Everything is designed from scratch by us. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the visual side of the magazine, not just the written content, but also the visuals. So if ever there is an ad like there was in the past a few times, it has to be very intentional, and hopefully even the ad should be done in a way that gives something to the reader, that the reader appreciates, that it's not just a nuisance.
Absolutely. I love that the focus is on content. And even just as you mentioned, the visual aspect of the magazine is something I really enjoy. The paper is just really high quality, it's full color. One of my favorite things, and it's silly, but I love that there's like a little matching bookmark in every issue that matches the cover of the issue. I love books, I love reading. I love bookmarks. So that's definitely something I really enjoy every time I open the issue. I love like looking for that bookmark to see what the design will be every time.
I totally agree. I love the bookmarks too. It was a great idea. We had a few issues back. The fact that it matches with the cover, it's a nice. It's not the same, but it matches kind of. And of course, when the new issue comes out, I get a sample of several magazines and a loads of bookmarks. So now bookmarks are all over the house, and I always use them for all the other books. They're great.
Absolutely. Um, for your like magazine readership, where do most of your subscribers live? Are they based in the US? Are they all over the place?
So the single biggest market is the US. Um, but given that it's a bit further away, it's geographically a bit more difficult, different from the European market. So US is first, and we have a lot of UK readers. Of course, the magazine is in English, so it's the most obvious market. But there is a lot of passionate tea drinkers also in Germany and the Netherlands and Portugal as well, Spain. So it's very similar, but the US stands out.
Definitely makes sense. If someone wanted to maybe contribute a story or an article to the magazine, how would they go about doing that?
It's a very simple process. They can either send an email or contact us directly on the website. Just, write in your title. We have a pitch. Give us an idea of what it is. What is the story about? Ideally, an outline or a few bullet points describing what you want to talk about, and we take it from there. It's a very straightforward and simple process. We very quickly understand if this is matching the future editorial, maybe not the next issue, maybe the issue after that or so. So it's a fluid conversation with everyone.
Definitely. And it's been really great to see your journey with the magazine. I know we met at World Tea Expo when you were first getting started. It's been really great to see, your progress and the growth of the magazine. Where do you think it will be heading in the future?
It's a very good question. Given the nature of the business of the magazine, I don't know what to do first. There is so much to do at any given time, and production still takes so much of my mental capacity and effort. So, looking further ahead, the how do you call the timeline of the publication has not been exactly set in stone. I would like to improve on that. So, for example, this year we only published an issue it came out in January, and now the latest one came out in September. There was a huge gap in between it. That doesn't quite align with the idea of publishing 3 issues per year. So now we're scrambling, and we'll probably deliver it in the shortest amount of time. We have already issue 13 planned to come out in November. So that's great. But moving forward, I would like it to be a little bit more set and it's streamlined and have it published on a regular basis. But also there is a lot of things you would like to do online. So add additional content and additional interaction with the readers online, not just having the print magazine, but also a little bit more interactive way of talking to the community. That would be great.
Yeah, I think that would be really great. I can imagine that the kind of person that might be attracted to a physical media like a magazine may not be the person who's like extremely online.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be a really great point for tea
Mm-hmm.
drinkers in really different places to be able to connect through your magazine.
And it's also the idea that the magazine is really for you to disconnect and sit down and read for, half an hour or more if you want, uninterrupted. But as the magazine comes out every 4 months, there is a lot of time in between, and we have a lot of ideas and a lot of topics to talk about. So we want to fill the gap somehow digitally and be a little bit more connected to the readers in this way to supplement whatever the magazine provides in another way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your magazine is a testament to just how broad and how much depth the world of tea has. Just the fact that you're still finding things to write about, you're still having different stories being told. And one of the things I love too is that you really show all the different aspects there are of tea. Often people will focus on one particular thing, like gong fu cha, but there's really so much to tea
Mm.
and they're all valid in different ways. So I really love that you do show that breadth that the world of tea has.
Mm. I agree. I think it's very important to not be very focused on just one aspect of the culture because the culture is so vast. It's really hard to comprehend unless you really delve into it. Um, it comes from essentially one country. It's spread into several, and now it's all over the world. Tea is grown in countries that people would not even imagine that it can. Argentina or all over Europe. There is so much to tell. And even, some tea lovers will say that, they only like Gongfu tea or they are very focused on the Japanese tea ceremony. That's great, and that's a very valid and important part of the culture. But not everyone does that. Not everyone is familiar with that, and some people may even be intimidated by it. I've seen many cases where people who know nothing or very little about tea are shown a Japanese tea ceremony. They try the ceremonial teas, and they don't like it because it's such an acquired taste where you have to really take it slowly to appreciate it. I think, at least in my case, that's what happened. I didn't like Sencha or Gyokuro at the first try. I had to try again and understand what it is about to really see the value and the beauty in it. So the magazine has to be, and I want it to be, a mix of the hardcore tea fans who like the proper traditional old way of making, the Japanese and Chinese way of making tea, but also for those who are more casual about it. So everyone can find something in it, and it's talking about tea casually and on a lighter level is a gateway for new people to join the community and join the culture.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. So, how do people find out about the magazine? How do they subscribe?
So I suppose the way people find us most is on Instagram, on the Read 80. That's where a lot of the information happens, a lot of the connection happens, although we could do more to improve on that. We also have a newsletter, and we have around, I think now it's 80 stockists around the world who carry the magazine across almost all continents, I think. So yeah, it's easy to obtain. It's easy to get. People can order online, or they can find it in their local stockists if they're lucky. But yeah, we ship worldwide, so it's straightforward.
That's great. And how much does it cost to subscribe? Just so people have an idea.
It's 22 euros, the latest issue, which is a bit more in dollars, but the subscription includes shipping, so there's no extra charge for that. Um, and it comes out. Subscribers are the first people to get it when a new issue is out. So yeah, there are a few perks to subscribing.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't recommend it more. If you love tea, if you follow this channel, I'm sure you do. It definitely is just a really wonderful resource. I love keeping them on my shelf. They're super aesthetic. You can see I've got my stack of issues there. I love that each one is a different color and a different look, but really just super high quality. They almost act as like a coffee table book in a way because they are just really, really beautiful. Um, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
That is the idea. It is the idea to make something beautiful that people appreciate and can learn from.
Absolutely. One thing I'm curious about actually is where the name comes from. How did you choose that name and kind of what's the meaning behind it?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how we got to it, but I remember the very moment I was sitting in a car and I was talking to my partner about it. And I wanted something punchy that is related to tea, but not very obviously. I mean, 80 degrees is a temperature. I know it means something different in the US than it does elsewhere. But when people see it and they see 80 or 80 degrees, they instantly ask. It's not something too obvious. And once you ask, if you know that it's a magazine about tea and it's called 80 degrees, people assume that you need to boil tea at 100 degrees Celsius, which is 212 in Fahrenheit, I believe. But so that raises questions of why don't you boil it at full boil? Why is it lower temperature? And that's where the conversation starts, that you should not always boil fully the water for the different types of tea, and that there is much more that you can do or maybe should do to get the most out of your tea. And I always, still to this day, it's wonderful to see people's faces when they have this very sudden realization or understanding that tea is not just put on the kettle and wait for it to stop and pour it over.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. One of the biggest things that people get shocked when they talk with me about tea is, when I start talking about temperature, they're like, "What do you mean?" A lot of people really do just, boil the kettle. Once it whistles, they pour the tea.
Mm.
But it really does make a huge difference in, I think, your experience with tea once you learn that that's just a very simple thing you can use to control the taste of the tea.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I'm no expert in tea making. I have a lot of experience, but there's always so much more to learn. And just playing with temperature makes a huge difference. And it's, as you said, it's a very easy thing to do. So I've met a lot of people from when I was younger, and even nowadays, who, let's say I know I don't like green tea, and then I ask, well, what do you mean? How do you make green tea? Well, I have a tea bag and I pour boiling water over it. So instantly, you know that you don't really know what green tea is, because what you're drinking is not properly made green tea. I'm not even talking about the quality of the leaves. I'm not talking about the fact that it's in a tea bag. Just lower your temperature and you will see a difference. And then let's have this conversation again.
Yeah, absolutely. Green tea is definitely that big one that people always tell me they don't like, and it's almost always because they're making it with water that's too
Hmm. Not to mention the quality of water, but that's another level
high.
of
Yeah,
geekery.
but that's definitely one of the things I love about 80 degrees, because you cover a lot of those topics like water quality and different things like that that really wouldn't almost matter to somebody who, unless they really are very interested in tea.
Mhm. Yes, that's the idea. Because what I find a little bit sad is that people who don't know much about tea, they usually dismiss it very quickly as something that, tea. I always say that tea has carries historical baggage. So it's an ancient drink. It has thousands of years of history, but we all know it from our childhood. We've all been given tea. I was given tea by my parents, by my grandparents. No one really thinks about it. It's just there. Very often, people used to drink it when younger because they were ill. So it's often a remedy. So to talk about tea as in a specialty way, like, this is something that people craft and can provide a wonderful range of flavors and aromas. I think it's very hard for them to grasp, because the idea of tea that they have very ingrained is something much more simple and much less interesting. So it's hard sometimes to break through this barrier and make them understand that, if you give a little bit more effort to your tea drinking or tea making, doesn't have to be much, just a little bit, you can discover something brand new that you didn't know about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I'll
My
include the
pleasure.
link in the description for everything to do with the magazine so that everyone can check it out. But I definitely hope that this helps a lot of people find your magazine, because I couldn't be a bigger fan.
Thank you very much. You're too kind.